is Robert Basaraba. I am the Vice President of Strategic Projects for Southeastern Data Cooperative. In the interest of time, I'm going to zip through a couple things here, but we're basically an ERP provider to electric distribution utilities. We primarily serve co-ops, and the co-ops, as many of you know, are more rural in terms of their demographics, but our applications include financial, CIS billing, GIS, work management, mobile. We have just a ton of different solutions that span the entire organization. They go from everything from the person who's in the back office to someone who's 60 feet up in the air in a bucket truck. Full disclosure on this, SEDC is also an OEM Tableau user, and so we provide Tableau as an embedded analytics solution, and we provide that to our membership as well. Our governance is basically a board of directors that comes from these various utilities, and they essentially manage us. So we're a co-op owned by co-ops, right? So not for profit sort of layer there. A little bit of background on us I just gave you. I'm not going to spend a ton of time going over the electric distribution cooperatives. I assume if you're in the energy business, I don't have to tell you what you guys do. So I'm going to just kind of breeze through that and get to the meat of this presentation, and then we'll take it from there. Basically, this is your typical energy distribution map. Again, I'm not going to spend time on this other than to say with the introduction of SCADA and AMI, it certainly changed the data landscape for us, and I'm sure for many of you as well, right? So, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Our market, basically, co-ops serve 42 million people across the country. Again, there are 900 co-ops, and SEDC effectively represents 1/3 of the marketplace. So that's sort of like the background of who we are and what we do. And now I want to get into the meat of this. Okay, so our technology stack is most of our core applications are written on Oracle. We use a lot of it, and I have to be honest here, I am not, I'm a little bit biased. I'm not a big fan of Oracle. What I found was that we had to do a lot of fine tuning. We had to do lots of summary tables. We had to do all kinds of indexing, and it essentially turned into a mode of, we had to just fine tune everything we were doing with Oracle, flipping levers and, you know, turning knobs and just doing everything you could to give a good user experience. When you're working with iterative tools like Tableau and you start getting into the millions and millions of rows of data, I, not have to tell everyone in this room that Oracle is not the best at doing that. So, but that's where our production systems are. And what we did was we got with a company called Interworks who helped us run a pilot, and that pilot utilized Matillion to move data from our production systems into Snowflake. And so that's our pipeline, if you will, and then we overlay Tableau on top of Snowflake to get our visualization, our analysis done. And so that's pretty much our technology stack. I would argue, with the exception of Oracle, that this is one of, certainly one of the best that I've worked with in my career. And I've been with SEDC now for 20 years, so I'm into my 20th year. So in the co-op program, that just means I'm not the new guy anymore. For purposes of this presentation, I'm going to primarily stick to use cases that are involved with metering. And so I know some of you guys, especially if you're from some of these larger municipals or IOU type utilities, my customers in size range from 5,000 on the low end to about $250,000 on the high end, and we have everything in between. So I noticed some of the large municipals, that's not a lot, but I would just say things scale a little bit differently with the bigger size. So our sort of journey into Snowflake started really with meter data. And I kind of give you an illustration here, that kind of gives you the percentage of change. In our industry, because we're more spread out, we had a lot of power line carrier, which was very slow. It wasn't really, it was good technology if you were really spread out, but it sort of changed over the years. And so our customers went from reading once a month to ultimately reading once a day. Well, that was a huge percentage increase. Then they went from reading once a day to reading hourly, and that was, again, another huge increase. And then you started getting the RF type solutions where they could read multiple channels on sub-hourly basis. And you could just see when I went from a daily reader to, every quarter hour, that was a 9,500% increase in the volume of data. So, you know, again, if you're from a larger utility, you don't need to tell you this, you already know, dealing with the data is a challenge. And so we've also been doing some work with SCADA, and again, just stuff that we're doing now in Snowflake really was not possible in Oracle, at least with any kind of humane outcome, right? So what got us going was the North Carolina Statewide, NCEMC, which they handle delivery point distribution for most of the co-ops in the state of North Carolina. They do have a couple that are non-members. These guys are big in microgrids. They're big in you know, demand reduction. They're, you know, they have a big DERMS program, just all kinds of things going on. And so they want to do a lot of analysis, but what they really needed was they needed visibility into our mutual clients simultaneously. And what does that mean? Rather than having to go and do the data gymnastics of connecting to all these sites and trying to synchronize data and keep it all together on a regular basis, what we did was we pipelined that data into Snowflake and gave them what's called a secure view, where they could sign in and just see the pieces of data that these different utilities were exposing to them. And so that's what started our pilot. And initially we weren't sure, you know, we were looking at a variety of technologies. SEDC is pretty big in the BI community here in Atlanta. I would tell you we go to a lot of the meetings, and I'm also a co-admin for the OEM users community for Tableau. So, you know, we started asking around, and ultimately, you know, it took us to Snowflake. And so my pilot project was 6 months, was scheduled to be 6 months long. And it was really impressive. We were up and online in a week on Snowflake, and that's no joke. So I added this slide because I wanted to show you guys what our first experience was with it. We initially ran an extract of AMI data. We were pulling out interval data on a utility that was 80,000 meters, just reading hourly, and pulled a number of years of history, basically 1 billion rows. And we said, okay, let's drop that and see what it does. So Oracle took us over 6 hours to extract the data. We wrote, and you can see here, I just actually grabbed the screen from the admin console. You could see that we actually wrote 970 million rows in 1 minute and 5 seconds from an S3 bucket. So, you know, I would tell you guys that, you know, that kind of performance was just not something that we were familiar with. We've, you know, we had piloted with a number of different systems or a number of different database technologies in the on-premise world. But when we moved to this, we were literally shocked by what we saw. Today, the environment right now is closing in on 120 billion rows of data. And so again, you guys know that if you're trying to do analysis with on-premise systems or with other types of technologies, it's just a real challenge. I mean, it's a real challenge trying to get to do iterative type things, and iterative analysis is where we see the industry going. So, yeah, so you can sort of see there, that's, I literally just sum the number of rows and you can see where I'm at. So that got us into a little bit more advanced analysis that I want to take a few minutes and talk about. And so everybody that is, you know, involved in electrical distribution understands that peak energy is the most expensive energy, right? And so it's very important to really understand what's driving this. And so we did this analysis, this particular co-op. They're just over 100,000 meters, and they read a lot of sub-hourly data. So they're reading 30-minute intervals, and then on their demand meters, they're reading 5-minute intervals and multi-channel data. So this analysis, or this graph you're seeing, well, it's pretty simple, is literally an aggregation of total consumption over a 1-year period of time, and it represents just over 2 billion rows of data. So the red along the bottom is that peak hour for each one of those days, right? And so when you do the math on this, what you come back with is peak energy was 5.5% of their total consumption, but it represented 30% of their cost. So clearly understanding the cost drivers behind peak demand had a very big financial impact on their business, right? And so again, this was all data they had, they just couldn't use it because their platform wasn't going to support it. So we started breaking it down and we said, okay, let's look at that. And then we started to do various analysis and looked at each class of service that was in that peak and how it broke down and, you know, what each class of service contributed to that peak, you know, because that's a very critical function in terms of rate modeling. And understanding who's driving those costs obviously is a big deal. So, so we started looking at who was coincident to the peak. And we said, okay, in this particular example, you can see that across that 2 billion, those 2 billion rows of data, that the residentials were 53% of that coincident peak. And so the industrials and the commercials, you can see the commercials 12%. What we found interesting in this particular data was you can literally look at how flat commercial and industrial load is, and you can literally tell what day of the week it is just by looking at their load profile. So we started drilling into that more and we said, okay, now we're getting a little bit more of an understanding here. And we started saying, okay, well, let's look at those customers that were coincident to the system peak. And then we said, okay, we want to look at how many times that occurred. So in a given month, in this case, we took the peak month for the year, which was January for this utility. We said, how many times were customers coincident to the peak? And we sort of started dropping them into buckets. And we said, okay, everybody here that's been coincident to the system peak 6 or more times in the month, they are a candidate for some type of load management program, whether it's time of use rates, whether it's load management switches, some type of energy management program, and those are the specific people to target. So I understand if I have 2 million meters and I'm, you know, targeting a fractional percent of those, and I send out solicitations and marketing messages to all of them, you know, I'll get some kind of response back, and that will have an impact. Well, with the smaller utilities, you know, they need a much more focused effort because it takes a lot more to move the needle for them than it does, you know, if you have millions of meters. The next piece of this, and I'm sort of kicking it into high gear here a little bit because I know we're going to be short of time, but the next thing we did was we started looking at public data sources, and we joined the locations in the GIS system to the public data behind them, and then we started doing analysis based on the energy consumption. And you can see in this particular correlation matrix that mobile homes do not have good energy signatures. Well, you know, you didn't really need to be told that. I mean, most people know that mobile homes do not have good energy profiles, but to see it in the data was what we were really shooting for. So we took these attributes, and there were over 20 of them, and we just ran through an analysis of them. And we looked at construction types, and we looked at, you know, the year the property was built. We looked at, you know, just every type of attribute that was available in those public data sources, and then sort of grouped the customers. And that tells us something about, you know, the energy and who's using what and what groups to target for certain things. And that led us into a geographical analysis. And what this was we actually took the kilowatt hours and we divided it by the square footage multiplied by time, and it gave us a baseline energy consumption ratio for every location on the system. And it really told us who was using the electricity or who was energy intense, right? And that's important for a number of reasons, as you know, but in this case, you can see some of the bluer locations that we actually determined that those were served by gas, natural gas, and not electric heat. So there's various things you learn about your customers in this process. We continued to do the analysis, and it took us down to literally a level where we could go and look at any given neighborhood and say, well, am I looking at a well pump? Is this a business? Is it a residence? Is it, you know, what's going on here to determine, you know, whether or not we have various energy management programs that we can market to them. So this particular customer actually has now, you know, analysis that tell them whether or not they might just want to look at locations that have pools or various specific attributes, you know, that were constructed on a certain, you know, within a certain number of years or something like that. They basically can segregate and sort the data however they want. And it's really, really been beneficial for them. So again, you get to a place where you go, okay, we know who to market what to. And that's a big deal when it comes to electric vehicle rates, a big deal when it comes to energy audits, a big deal when it comes to knowing your customer. And I would suggest to you guys that that's a pretty strong area of focus for us, is helping our membership understand their customers, because it just ultimately helps them better run their business, right? As far as this analysis goes, this sort of took us to the end game. And what we did here was we took all these attributes and we said, okay, if you have a positive attribute, we subtract a point, and if you have a negative attribute, we add a point. And then we added up all the attributes and dropped you into a certain bucket. And so what does that tell us? If you look at this and you say everyone to the left of 0 and above about 0.025, those are people that have really good energy attributes, but really poor energy profiles, right? So there's something with them that we would want to target them for, like time of use rates. The people as you go to the right, those are people that have bad attributes and bad consumption, at least north of 0.025. Well, these are people that we would typically target for energy audits. So we would say, okay, we know they have bad physical properties. Maybe they need insulation. Maybe they need window treatments. Maybe they need, who knows? You would probably want to market them with energy audit type literature so that you could see if there was something you could do to help improve their position. Now, we also have energy improvement loans that our customers do and stuff like that. So knowing this information really helped them target very specific customers for very specific programs. So as you look at the people that have good profiles, the ones in the lower quadrant, those are people that have great attributes and great profiles, and the ones on the bottom that have bad profile or have good profiles but bad attributes, those are people that just care about their bills. So that's what we really learned here. I want to buzz through a couple more. I think I have a few more minutes, but I want to buzz through a couple more things that I wanted to share with you that we're doing. And again, I can't say to you guys that, we would never have gotten to this place if it wasn't for running in Snowflake, because we would never have been able to crunch the data like we can today. So our customers have also started doing high bill detection, and you can see I've protected the innocent here and blurred out some of the names. But if you look over here to the far right, you can see that spike in consumption right away, right? And so they have these tools now that they can run and actually look at, people that are starting to show abnormal signatures. And where does that take you? Well, this is an actual use case right here, right? Pretty common, especially here in the South. Get low refrigerant, AC just runs and runs and runs and runs. Doesn't cool anything, but it causes their bill to go up. It's another one, hot water heater installed under the house, bad plumbing or bad seal, and it just starts leaking. The element can never catch up. The thing just runs and runs and runs and runs and runs. So these are actual pictures taken from some of that analysis. This one I thought was pretty neat. This was a heat pump sequencer malfunction. It was running the heat and the AC simultaneously. So, certainly customers want to be made aware of that. And, and it's just a lot of data. It's just not the kind of data that you can just go into on your production system and query out and answer these questions. So this particular utility, they did a program. The very first 200 members they went to, they basically found 100 heat pump malfunctions, 38 defective hot water heaters, 15 thermostats with aux heat turned on, 2 bad well pumps, 3 torn or damaged ductwork, various devices left running continuously. But the net result of that is they're hitting about 80%. So 8 out of every 10 customers that they engage, they're finding something. And so that really is a testament to how good the data is, or how good leveraging that data can be. The last things I'll share with you here is we're also using it for rate modeling, right? We're doing scenario building. We're letting them go in and enter variables where they change the charges and then look at a given meter to see where it would have been based on the hypotheticals that we assigned to it. I want to call it data rate is what we're doing. So we're actually engaged in something in Kentucky right now, utilizing Snowflake to model rates for a utility based on the data. And that's not a subset where we're looking at this sampling group out of this class and that sampling group out of another class, and then running some calculations saying, well, if these samplings hold true throughout the entire install base, then here's what your rate ought to be. Well, what we're doing is actually crunching all the data and saying, this is what your rate ought to be. So it's pretty exciting stuff. Takeaways from my end was the power of a Tableau Snowflake stack and someone that can help get you there. I mean, it was priceless for us. I mean, we would still be messing around with different technologies trying to figure out how to make this work, and instead we feel like we've made a lot of progress. Things that we didn't think were possible, we're now doing. We're also creating net new things in our industry. So because our utilities are a little bit smaller and we can be a little bit more nimble and pivot quickly to new technology, it's really helped us. So again, they've saved a lot of time, money, and they're targeting specific people with specific programs because they understand them better. They know who's driving their costs more. So, these are all things you can do with the data, and I can't tell you guys enough how happy I've been with my experience. And I knew really when I have an Oracle DBA who's been like a systems DBA for 25 years, 30 years, something like that. And he just said, what I just did in Snowflake is just not possible in Oracle. And he's worked on some huge Oracle environments. So I knew I was on the right track at that point. But to sort of summarize this up, I would just tell you as a partner, as using Snowflake as a partner with our Tableau stack, those tools together, Matillion for our pipeline, I mean, we're creating value for our customers. And that the more value we add, the more value they can deliver to their customers. And that, from our standpoint, we're very service driven. So yeah, so that's where we are. So I know I went fast there, but I'm happy to take questions or to allow you guys to, reach out to me independently. I'm happy to share whatever we've learned on it, learned going through these processes. But yeah, we're heavily committed to it, and we're just expanding our Snowflake environment as quickly as we can. So.